And welcome back to TL Talks podcast. I am TL. It's good to have you. Let's get right into it. We have a good interview coming up with Oscar Lopez, and so we want to make sure that we're staying on track with time. So first is my thought of the day. I do this segment every month. My thought of the day has to do with wrong delivery. Now you might be asking yourself, TL, what do you mean by wrong delivery? You mean like U.S. postal mail? Where are you going? Well, let me explain to you. What I mean by wrong delivery is when somebody is talking to you and they have feedback or advice or just any form of communication they're trying to portray to you. If it's delivered wrong, then the message is lost. So it doesn't matter if you're giving the best advice in the world, just a straight nugget of great information. Doesn't matter if you are saying the truest statement ever said. It doesn't matter if it's the most valuable thing that person will hear that day or that year or in their entire life. If you deliver that message the wrong way, then the message is lost. So what I mean by that is, let's say you say something and you come off very abrasive, right? You come off like very rude, very disrespectful, condescending, just basically come off like an asshole. It doesn't matter if what you said was true. Doesn't matter if it was wise. Doesn't matter if it was helpful. It doesn't matter if your intentions were good. If your delivery sucks, the message is lost, and you look like an asshole. And so that's my thought of the day. I recently experienced that in my life, unfortunately, and luckily I wasn't the person doing it, but it was done to me. And it's just something I think a lot of people don't really understand. They just think, if what I'm telling you is true, it shouldn't matter how I say it. But that's just not how communication works. And so I would challenge you that if maybe you're guilty of that, maybe you don't really care about how you deliver information to people or how you speak to people, I would challenge you to make sure that it's well received and you're talking to people the way they want to be talked to and that you're respectful at all times. Because there's not very many times where you need to be disrespectful. And especially if you have good intentions, you're not even trying to be disrespectful. But if you are, it's not really about what you're trying to be or what your intentions are. It's about what you did do and how that person received it, most importantly. And so I think it's just a good nugget of advice. Make sure that when you're delivering information to people, whether it's advice or just talking to them, you're doing it in a way that they appreciate so it can be received well and they can process it and use it. Because otherwise, it's just you're wasted your breath. And it's a lose-lose for everybody. Moving on, my second segment usually is if I were president. I thought about that, and I was trying to think of something good to pass on this month, but I didn't come up with much. So I'll skip that one for this month, but I'll be back at it next month. So there's that. Moving on to my third segment, which is called TLRantz. So your boy flew back to Ohio, his native land, this week or last weekend. I was there from Saturday to Tuesday, and the reason I went back is because one of my good friends, Ray, bought us tickets to the first Browns home game versus the Jets. So went to the game. We had awesome seats. We were like 5 rows up from the Jets sideline, crazy close. And so the seats were phenomenal. The weather was a little bit hot. It cooled off in like the third, fourth quarter, but most of the game it was pretty hot. So I was wearing an undershirt and my white Browns jersey, and so I had layers and I was pretty hot. But still, first world problem. It was good. Well, the game went pretty well, right? Hats off to the Jets. They have a pretty good defense, and they were able to, I wouldn't say stop, but contain our run game for most of the game. The thing about the Browns is we're built to run at you and wear you down, so that if you're a good defense, we're not able to successfully run the ball until the fourth quarter. If you're not a good defense or not a good run defense, we can run on you the entire game. and it's just a nightmare. So the Jets were the first option. They have a good defense. They were able to contain us in the run game for 3 quarters. Then in the fourth quarter, just like it's supposed to happen, the Browns were able to run the ball, pull away, and secure the win. Well, Nick Chubb, I think he scored 3 touchdowns on Sunday. He scored his 3rd touchdown of the game with under 2 minutes left to put the Browns up by 13 points. So me and Ray and his wife, Takora, we said, we talked about leaving, trying to beat the traffic, and Takora's dad was picking us up. So we're like, he's like, do you want to take off or just stick around? And I was like, yeah, we can take off. I feel pretty comfortable. The Browns are up by 13, less than 2 minutes left. Jets have no timeouts. I mean, pretty safe to say the Browns have won this one, and we're 2-0. So we start leaving the stadium, and we get, probably 200 feet away from the stadium, and I overhear some Browns fans saying, they already scored? Like, annoyed, right? And so I check my phone, and it says the Jets have scored a touchdown. And I'm like, well, that's annoying because, they had no timeouts left, and how do you give up a big play that fast if you're the Browns defense? But it shouldn't matter, right? If you're up by 13 points, oh, by the way, Cade York missed an extra point, which never happens. So we're up by 2 scores. They score fast, which is annoying, but it shouldn't matter because we're still up by 2 scores. So then Ray pulls up the game on his phone, and we're watching it, and they do an onside kick, and they do this like crazy, creative, effective onside kick where basically he's lining up to kick it to the right, he kicks it to the left, and puts a spin on it that's very hard to recover. It's like sideways spin, like a tornado. So that it goes to Amari Cooper, who has some of the best hands in the team, and he wasn't able to field it. The Jets get the ball, and now they have a chance to win the game. They have the ball with like a minute left, no timeouts, down by 6. So unfortunately, they drove down. Joe Flacco threw a touchdown pass to the Ohio State boy with about, I think it was 22 or 17 seconds left, something like that. Kick the extra point, they go up by 1. So within less than 2 minutes left, the Browns went from up 13 to down 1 with, like I said, about 20 seconds left. So our offense gets the ball, and I'm like, well, if we can get in field goal range, which is pretty far for Cade York, we could still win this game, even though we kind of pissed it away. So first play, Jacoby Brissett takes off for like a 15-yard run, gets out of bounds. I'm like, well, that's a great start. Next play, unfortunately, he throws it to the receiver over the middle. I don't think he saw the safety. Safety cut it off, picked it off. Jets win by 1. So TLRantz for this month is not even about the Browns blowing the game. I mean, obviously that's really tough to swallow as a Browns fan. It's more about stupid fans. So, like, of course, like after a loss like that, you have a lot of finger pointing. Okay, you're gonna have people that blame Stefanski, blame Brissett, blame Chubb, blame Delpit, blame the defensive court. I mean, just so much finger pointing, right? Here's what frustrates me. People that say it's Nick Chubb's fault for not going down, like not going down so you could take a knee and end the game and scoring a touchdown instead. Blaming Nick Chubb for that loss is idiotic. Are you kidding me? The dude that ran 3 touchdowns is the singular reason why we won the game, besides Jacoby Brissett playing much better on offense. Like, are you out of your mind? Do you know what the average, do you know what the numbers, the chances of the Jets winning that game are? Like, it's less than 1%, right? Like, it shouldn't have happened. All these things had to go perfectly for the Jets to have a chance. All those things, unfortunately, went that way. To blame Nick Chubb, you should be ashamed of yourself. Like, I don't even think you should be a Browns fan. That's just so idiotic to me. People that blame Jacoby Brissett are also stupid. Jacoby Brissett played much better than week 1, exactly what I was hoping for. I was hoping that it was, just him getting more chemistry with the ones. But looked much better. Besides the pick at the end, the dude balled out, played really well, took care of the ball, had some nice passes, had great chemistry with Amari Cooper, and I was very happy with him. Not his fault either. And then you go to people blaming Joe Woods. Listen, I've had moments where I'm frustrated with Joe Woods as a defense coordinator. I've had times where I've wondered if he's the right guy for us to call our defense. Sunday was not one of those days. I know for a fact, based on common sense and the interviews after the game, the coaching wasn't the problem. The coaches literally went on the sideline before the last Jets drive, or not last, but second to last, and spelled it out for the players. They're trying to score fast. Don't let anybody get behind you. Keep it all in front of you. We'll be fine. What happens right away? Corey Davis gets behind the defense, a la Grant Delpit, scores a 66-yard touchdown. Now they have a chance to win. So, it wasn't a coaching thing. So, to me, it's very obvious that if anybody deserves the blame, it's Grant Delpit. Now, Kevin Stefanski took the blame. I respect that. You're the head coach. Ultimately, it falls on you. Anthony Walker, the middle linebacker, he took the blame. I respect that too. He's a defensive captain. It wasn't his fault, but he is the communicator of the defense. Also respectable. Not his fault, but I respect that he took the blame regardless, right? What concerns me is Grant Delpit was quoted as saying, I'm not going to play the blame game with my teammates. Denzel Ward said in an interview that he had the flats on that play. His job was the flats. So if you only saw Grant Delpit and Denzel Ward in the screen, the shot of the touchdown. So obviously if he had flats, Delpit had deep. It's not rocket science, right? So it's obviously Grant Delpit's fault. What concerns me is Grant Delpit, when he was given the chance to take accountability and say, listen, that was my bad. It was a miscommunication, complete brain fart, or whatever. I don't know what happened. Accountability is what we want to see. As fans, if you're going to have an embarrassing loss like that where people are going to be ridiculing us for the whole next week as fans, at least just own it, right? Everybody owned it except for Grant Delpit and Myles Garrett. Grant Delpit didn't say it was his fault, said I'm not going to play the blame game. Myles Garrett had the nerve to say he didn't like the fans booed. Myles, bro, are you kidding me? The Browns lost a game up 13 with less than 2 minutes left, and you want the fans to cheer? Come on, man. You're a smart guy. That's not logical, right? So that's my rants for the month. It just happened on Sunday. It's very fresh. It's very frustrating. Thankfully, the Browns play tomorrow on Thursday Night Football against the Steelers. So we have a quick week, and we're able to kind of get that taste out of our mouth. If we're able to beat the Steelers, that's best case scenario. You know what I mean? To wipe away that memory and just move on. So as long as we beat the Steelers tomorrow night, I'm not going to say it's all good because we should have won that game and that could cost us a playoff berth. But at least we got the taste out of our mouth. We got to move on, and we're back on the winning track. So we'll see. That's tomorrow night. When I release this podcast, it'll be after that game happened. And so I predict the Browns will win. I think they're going to fix the communication errors. Jacoby's going to play well again. Nick Chubb is Nick Chubb. And the Steelers' offense looks limited to me. I don't think it'll be easy. All the division games are hard. But I think the Browns are ready to redeem themselves on Thursday, to say the least. And so I'm looking forward to how they play. So that's my TLRantz / Browns talk. Basically, we're 1-1. We beat Carolina thanks to Cade York's leg. And then we lost that crazy game to the Jets. We have Steelers next on Thursday. And lastly, before we get into the interview, is Denver Bandits talk. So Denver Bandits had their first tryout of the year 2 weekends ago, I think it was. And it was good. There was about 15 players there. Only a few, 3 or 4 were returning players. So most of them were new players, which is cool. We had some good prospects. I'd say most. Definitely most. If there was, let's say there was 12 new players. Out of those 12, I would say there's 8 to 10 that could probably contribute right away. So whether that's potentially starting or just a really good athlete that we can find a place for, it was encouraging. So I think The tryout on October 1st will be much bigger because it's a national tryout for WNFC. So I'm looking forward to that one. But the first tryout went very well. I was late because I had a flag football game, but it seemed like it went well. It was organized, and our new OC Rashad Ray was there, and so he got to get a glimpse of women's football in person, and so he's excited too. And so I can't wait. The season's going to be a blast. So without further ado, we get into the interview. Like I mentioned earlier, my interview this month is with Oscar Lopez. Oscar Lopez is the host of the Gridiron Beauty podcast. He has pages on Facebook and Instagram, I think Twitter too. And so he's been around much longer than my podcast, and he's been doing a great job having a comprehensive view of women's football, covering a lot of different leagues in different countries. And I mean, I don't know how he does it, but he does a great job. And I've been on his podcast several times before, and so it was cool to have the roles reversed. And I got to learn some new things about him, get to know him better. The one thing I'm going to apologize to you guys in advance about is he had not great service where he's at in California. And so there was a couple times where his video froze, and then it took 5 to 10 seconds to get him to reset it and then come back and unmute himself and then go. So the conversation was fine. It wasn't we had a hard time getting back on track, but there was a handful of times where that happened. And so I apologize in advance. I know it's not great quality, but it is what it is. It's a first world problem, and hopefully you enjoy it anyways. So without further ado, here is my interview with Mr. Oscar Lopez. All righty. I'd like to welcome Mr. Oscar Lopez, the TLTALKZ podcast. Oscar is a huge voice in the women's football world. He has been for a long time. I've been honored to join his podcast in the past, and so it's good to have the roles reversed. So first of all, welcome, Oscar. It's good to have you.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. So what I wanted to first talk to you about, Oscar, is getting to know you more as a person. Right. I don't know a ton about you personally. I know you served in the military like me, but I don't know much about your background as far as where you grew up, how you grew up, just whatever you're willing to share. Basically, I know that you're bilingual, which I'm jealous of, but I don't know much about your background. So if you don't mind sharing some of that with us, I'd love to hear it. Oh, I think you're muted now. See it. See the little mute button there.
There he goes.
There you go. You're back.
So I grew up in a Hispanic. I grew up in a Hispanic family.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad would not allow us not to be bilingual. So the moment you hit the door, you had to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
So out the door, you can speak whatever you want, but inside he was really hardcore about doing that. And I think it's because both my grandmothers on both sides were living in Mexico at the time. So it was kind of important for him to make sure that we interact with them and, able to communicate with them.
Gotcha. Did you grow up in California?
Yeah, I grew up in actually in my early years. My dad brought us over when he first got his immigration papers and everything from Mexico. He got a job in Los Angeles. So we grew up in Los Angeles till I was about 7. Mm-hmm. And then we moved over to the Central Valley, which is south of San Jose, California, over Monterey and Carmel. Uh-huh. And he basically worked 20 years in the agricultural industry. Mm-hmm. So he was basically a foreman for lettuce, broccoli. He would basically travel from the Central Coast over to Yuma, Arizona, in terms of seasons for the crops and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then we ended up living in Monterey, nearby Monterey, which is Salinas, which is a big agricultural hub. Mm-hmm. And that's where I mostly grew up. Went to high school there. Was able to, after high school, ended up graduating, and I head over to the military. In my junior went to boot back, graduated, and then started my military career in the Army over in South Carolina and Kentucky.
Okay. You said you joined the military or got involved with the military your junior year of high school?
Yeah, so I was tired of working the fast food joint type mentality, and
Yeah.
so I told my dad, "Hey, I just want to do something different." So he's like, "Okay, well, I'm not gonna be able to put you through college, so you're gonna have to figure out a different way to go to college." So
Yeah.
then we talked about it. The best way to do it would probably just go to the Army and put in, a couple years in the Army, get my GI Bill, be able to take advantage of some of the college tuition and some of that.
Gotcha. Okay. So I guess the only thing you haven't mentioned is how your childhood looked. So we know that you lived in LA for the first like 7 years, then you moved to Central Valley area. You were in a bilingual home from day one, so that's been second nature to you. But how did your childhood look, Oscar, as far as like what you did with your time, what your hobbies were, did you play instruments or play sports or like stuff like that?
I played soccer when I was younger,
Okay.
and then I also played regular baseball
Yeah.
when I was going through high school,
Okay.
14 or older, baseball in the
Yeah.
local teams and stuff like that. Played center fielder, first base. Ended up playing little different positions there.
Yeah.
I also played football.
Mhm.
Football was not my best sport, by the way. I loved the sport, but I wasn't a very good football player.
Right.
As my coach would say, you're third string for a reason, and that's why you're here. So I'd only
Yeah.
get like 2 downs a game.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. I was actually a better soccer player than I was a football player,
Okay.
because soccer is basically, it's kind of like a Hispanic thing,
Hmm.
which kind of die hard to have it at the home. My dad was a big, a big Mexico team type of guy for soccer, so it was like the main sport. He actually was a diehard, or still is a diehard Dodger fan.
Okay.
So when Fernando Valenzuela came around at the time, we were all hardcore Mexico support for Fernando Valenzuela, and then he was already a big hardcore Dodger fan. So
Yeah.
that for him that was just like the ultimate, and for us it was the ultimate. And then when Fernando really struck it in L.A. as a
Mhm.
fanfare, I mean, just everybody in the Latin community just went crazy, right? Just
Yeah.
ultimate pitcher, and all that. So it was kind of a nice fanfare for us there. And then it became a situation where, we're basically diehard Dodger fans to this day. My dad's like diehard Dodger fan.
Gotcha. And you were in the military. Were you in the army or what branch were you in?
I was in the Army. Initially, I was supposed to be in an MP unit.
Oh, okay.
So that was my second MOS. My first MOS was a Bradley Tank Systems, which is basically armor. So I went to train in South Carolina for boot camp. Then
Yeah.
I was taken over to Fort Knox for the
Mm.
remaining of my 2.5 years.
Mhm.
Um, so I ended up working on what you called a crapshoot project, which is the Bradley tanks,
Yeah.
which turned out to be probably the worst money that the government has ever spent. And the story goes, that whoever designed that obviously was a moron in some ways. You couldn't take it, to Saudi Arabia. You couldn't take it to any other sand unit. It was basically more for a street fair type tank
Yeah.
on straight land. But it was supposed to be the upgrade to the Abrams, the German tanks, and it never equaled out to that. So
Gotcha.
I never set foot, Terry, in a true Bradley tank. Okay, we were always trained in a simulator. It was like an indoor simulator with all
Interesting.
the bells and whistles.
Yeah. I
And I
see.
finally had to tell my sergeant, how are we going to do real life combat, maneuvers if we're in a simulator?
Mhm.
What am I going to do? And it was all electronics, so it wasn't like hydraulics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So his pitch to us was, this thing can withstand like 6 hits, right? And I
Mhm.
said, how do you move the cannon to defend yourself? Well, you can't. So you have to basically run away. And I'm like, what is this? Coming from an Abrams tank where you can actually maneuver the cannon. I mean, it's hard to maneuver the cannon back and forth, right? But it was just a crapshoot. It was like, what is going on here? So
Yeah.
after Fort Knox, I completed my training, I graduated and all that.
Hmm.
Then my dad got sick. He had diabetes and some other ailments that came about. So
Hmm.
it kind of made me go back home. And so I just couldn't back home. And so I ended up going back to California and reenlisting in the reserve, U.S. Army Reserves.
Okay.
At the time, the reserves didn't have an armor unit locally where I lived.
Hmm.
So I would have to have driven 3 miles to Sacramento to an MP unit. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So,
Yeah.
because I went reserve basically, it's 2 weekends out of the month and whatever.
Yeah.
And so I ended up, one of my buddies was working, or actually was in the Cal National Guard.
Hmm.
And he's like, okay, we need a transportation specialist over here. And that's your third MOS. Are you sure you want to go ahead and, come with us? So I said, sure, that's fine. Just changing tires and basically oil changes and, just vehicle maintenance basically.
Yeah.
And so he said, yeah, sure, I'll talk to my superior and then we'll start the paperwork and everything. So I've transferred from the U.S. Army. My last 4 years, I transferred to the Cal National Guard, where I
Hmm.
was basically a sergeant. And so once I got into the mix with the transportation unit, it was pretty nice. The only claim to fame on my resume as a military guy is the 2.5 weeks of the Rodney King riots
Oh.
in Los Angeles, which I experienced firsthand. So that
Mm.
was pretty intense. It was a very climatic time, kind of
Yeah.
like a movie-ish type thing, where there was nobody on the roads in Los Angeles. Um, just a lot of issues. When you go to the military, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the background and nobody wants to talk about. Hey, we're going to give you rubber bullets. Like, we're not going to rubber bullets. That was our commander in chief at the time. He's like, screw you people. That was like the San Bernardino police. That's like, we're not giving you real bullets. I'm like, what? So we had to wait like 2 days in San Bernardino, San Fernando Valley, for our boss to send a request to Sacramento for them to approve real bullets for us to use on the streets because they wanted us just to use the rebound bullets, which like we're not
Oh,
going into that. Not in South Central, not over in Compton.
yeah.
You're just crazy. We're gonna go in there with rubber bullets when everybody else is live fire. It's
Yeah.
like it was just ridiculous. Anyways, so that was my experience. 2 weeks out. Then after that,
Oh, you're back. It muted you again. For whatever reason, whenever you join, it mutes you at the beginning.
there we
Sorry.
go.
There, we're back. Go
There we
ahead.
go. I think our connection's the weather's kind of bad out here, so it's probably
Oh,
cutting in
okay.
and out.
Yeah, no worries.
You got me there?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah. So, anyways, I came back. I did 6 years, and then in my final fifth year, I was going to go for promotion, and I never got my promotion, and I just kind of got frustrated and said, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm
Yeah.
out. So
Hmm.
I got hired by Home Depot.
Hmm.
At the time, Home Depot was just starting out with 200 stores nationwide. So
Yeah.
I got in at the right time. They offered some retirement. I was, in the mix for that. So I built my career over 10 years with the Home Depot out here locally in California. So I was roaming around some of the Home Depots as an operational trainer and other capacities and stuff like that. Then I finally got, assistant store manager, and then I moved up to the ranks. And then I was able to help out in certain aspects and capacities in that aspect. So it was really nice for me.
Hmm.
Then, about 2008, I moved on in terms of retail management. I moved on to TJ Maxx Marshalls
Hmm.
because Home Depot is just a grind. After a while, it's like 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
You can't take that after a while.
Yeah.
And so I had my wife who got ill at the time with diabetes as well, like my father. So I had to cut back my hours. So at that point, I was like, I got to do something different. So one of
Yeah.
my friends was working already for TJ Maxx, and he's like, hey, there's only 2 shifts out here instead of 7.
You froze again. Still there? Hmm. Are there? You're back. You're muted again.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Good. So
Yeah,
yes.
I don't know why it's doing it. I think
Yeah.
it's just
So
the weather I because we've had a couple storms.
yeah,
So
it's okay. So
so
you're
basically
saying
I came back and I was working at TJ Maxx
TJ Maxx.
Marshalls.
Yeah.
Then I went from there. And then I just stayed there for almost 10 years as well. So I worked
Okay.
down there for a while, and then I kind of scaled back, went to college. So around 2010,
Hmm.
I was I was watching LFL. That's when it was first started out, and so I was really intrigued about the format, the 7-on-7, the fast-paced game, the arena game.
Hmm.
The allure of it. You know what I mean? When you watched it, it was hard hits. Everything was fast-paced. It was on MTV2 and things like that. So then that's when I ended up creating the Gridiron Beauties fan page,
Hmm.
to kind of just highlight some of the ladies and the games and everything else that happened as a fanfare. So I went into that aspect of it in November of 2010, I think it was. That's when the fan page was created.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
Mhm.
So the fan page was going strong. It was basically more of a gallery fan page. It wasn't like more of a news stories like it is now and how we do things now.
Yeah.
So then I got invited to go on to a podcast, a radio podcast with BJ Coletta, who
Uh-huh.
used to play I believe in the IWFL with the Sacramento Sirens,
Hmm.
who's inducted into the Hall of Fame as a broadcaster. Um, so she invited me over, and we talked about my passion, why I was covering the LFL, the reason for it. So I was really excited about it. At the time when I was covering the LFL, I had basically good relationships with like Monique Axiola, one of the major stars there, some of the LA Temptation players, Coach Tui Suanoa as
Hmm.
well to this
Hmm.
day, which is a good friend of mine as well in terms of
Yeah.
the LFL. Jim Wallen, just a bunch of people that I kind of hooked up with. And so they were really exciting, and they gave me insights as a fan. I was excited to to go down to the games and catch a couple games in Los Angeles. The 7-on-7 game. It was pretty fast paced. It was kind of like a different atmosphere that I've never seen before.
Mhm.
So when I talked to BJ when she put me on to the podcast, we were talking about that initially, and then she brought it to my attention that obviously there was tackle football teams locally,
Yeah.
up in Sacramento, coming like 2 hours away, the
Right.
Sacramento Sirens,
Hmm.
which were basically one of the top teams at the time in the IWFL. I think
Hmm.
they had won like a couple championships to their resume.
Yeah.
So I took a gander up north there, and kind of started to watch a couple of games. At the time it was the Bay Area Bandits. This is way back in the day. So I went to
Hmm.
see them up in San Francisco area,
Yeah.
and they were playing the Sacramento Sirens. Then I went down south. I wasn't able to catch any games down south because I didn't really travel down south except for the LFL games at the time.
Hmm.
So when she introduced me to, the other leagues, the IWFL leagues, the normal 11 tackle teams, I started researching. Why are they aren't they getting the exposure that the LFL is getting?
Hmm.
Why are they kind of like unknown at this
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
And so she gave me some feedback about fundraising. It's tough to start a team. She started a team. She gave all the ins and outs, like what a tackle football team consists of in terms of volunteers and everything else that's happening.
Yeah.
So I was able to kind of dive into her and pick her brain about it. And so our page kind of reverted to something different. So then I got together with myself and a couple people and kind of just started researching things and putting things together, and kind of realized that there was like at the time it was like over 50 teams overall, about almost close to 100 teams in terms of the WFA was just still in its infancy. So
Okay.
when I started covering, it was like 2011. So the WFA was young. It was like 2 years old at the time,
Hmm.
where the IWFL had been in existence, I think, since 2002 or something like that. So they had been pretty much established for over 10 years.
Yeah.
So I started, researching and getting that into my under my belt. Then I realized, obviously, that was just kind of like a niche that was not covered.
Mm.
And so like, how do I grow my fan page, right? You got to find a niche. So I started to figure out, okay, can I balance both? Because at the time, the LFL with the traditional tackle attitude, right?
Mm-hmm.
The tackle leagues were an acceptance of the LFL style of play
Right.
because of the bikini style outfit, the helmets, just a totally different game, right? To
Okay.
them, it was more sexist and exposure, and so they weren't accepting it. And I understood it was a marketing gig, because Mitchell Mortaza put in that much money, you got to be able to draw some attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Then they got on MTV2, and he got into issues with control, and the MTV2 did not want them to have the control or
Mm-hmm.
the final say. So he
Yeah.
basically botched that whole arrangement with MTV2. So then I moved on to covering them, and we were covering them still, front and center. Then we ended up branching out to covering the WFA, and then branching out to the IWFL. At the time, I reached out to everybody in both leagues just to try to figure out how we can network, how to get exposure.
Mm-hmm.
You had, Disney, who owned the IWFL, was never a fan because of the fact that I was covering both the other options as well.
Yeah.
So they never really, had a relationship with me. So basically became an outsider in
Mm.
a lot of ways. So I ended up at the time, uh, Facebook was just barely in its infancy as well, right? So you're building up networks internally and
Mm-hmm.
try to get people to send you feeds, stories, photographers to send you stills and stuff like that, because we don't have live video like we do now. Where options, where a lot of the teams are doing live video on via YouTube or uploading some sort of platform with video now that we're doing here, kind of
Right.
like what the WFA and the WNFC have currently done with Vire Sports and obviously FTF. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really young at the time, and so we started building the platform and gradually towards women's 11s. So we went from a 7-on-7 focus to a women's 11 focus.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did it gradually, build up relationships over time,
Mm-hmm.
which was really hard because a lot of the traditional tackle players were old school back in the day, and they were just not gonna sway.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of my conversations, Terry, with them was, let's talk marketing. We have to be marketable,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be acceptance. You have to have some acceptance to be marketable, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of them didn't understand marketability, the marketing part of things of happening. So
Mm-hmm.
as a social network guy that I am at the time building my platform, I really understood that you have to have those relationships for the reach factor. And when you started to dive into the analytics of Facebook
Mm-hmm.
and how it is to maximize your dollars for to get ads out there or post ads to reach, right? It was a lot easier. Back in the day, it was newspapers. You're spending a lot of $100 on a local market that nobody's going to care about you. Now you can spend a $100 and you can get about 10,000 or more people to kind of view your stuff, right? And it's front and center. It's a lot more engagement, a lot more reach. Where back in the day was local. You're lucky if you get like, out of that, 300 fans that you want in the stands, maybe you get 25 people out of that. Hopefully that 300, off the newspaper. Never
Yeah.
going to happen. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of tough to kind of like convey to them, because at the time they were saying, hey, this is what we've done. This is how we've done it for so long. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, my attitude was correct. And we're like spinning our wheels. This is how we've
Yeah.
done it for so long, and we're not getting anywhere. I
Yeah.
said, it's like the mouse and the wheel. We're just like running with the mouse and the wheel, and we're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And then I started diving in about some of the collapses, teams come and go. I started in 2010 and then 2011, 2012. And I started looking at that and going, why are teams coming and going?
Mm.
Why are they, some are staying, some are sustainable and the other ones are not. So
Yeah.
then I started realizing that obviously it was a lot of internal, right? The ownership is not that great in terms of doing management and facilitating player needs. It was a situation where they weren't taking care of the player, they weren't assessing the facilities. They weren't taking. In other words, back in the day, Terry, nobody was taking this as a business.
Mm.
Everybody was in for a quick buck. If I can get, 20, 30 people to pay me $10 for a tryout, I'm making some money off the side here. And whether you win or not, that's not a big deal, right? No big deal. Whoever shows up to the games shows up to the games. So there was no mentality like we currently have right now, where we're trying to blossom it into a real legit business, a sports business. And so to me, that was sad,
Hmm.
because at the time when you assessed the IWFL, it had been in existence for 10 years, right? And there was probably a handful of good teams, Austin Yellow Jackets, there was Boston Militia, there was just a couple named teams, right? So at 5 out of like 40 teams were legit viable organizations that really wanted to make some sort of progress to bring the sport to a mass
Higher level.
awareness. And
Yeah.
it wasn't happening because majority of them were blowouts.
Mm.
Every game was a blowout. You had teams with too many, and so to me that was the addressing thing. It's like, when do we get serious about the recruiting, the coaching? When do we get serious about really putting a quality program out there?
Yeah.
So the pushback I got was, this has happened to women in the past and everything, and I totally get it. I said I understand that aspect of it. I'm taking all that politics and everything aside, and let's just focus on the business side of things. How do we fix the business? How do we get the community to embrace you? How do you get the sponsors to come and say, I want to be part of this, right, locally? How do
Yeah.
you do that? And so when you take a look at high school programs, in your local city,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Why are they successful? Right? They do the same thing that a women's tackle football team does, right? 4 years, kids are gone. Coach has to do what? Revamp the program
Yeah.
with brand new, senior, freshmen, seniors, right? Juniors, right? There's
Yeah.
there's a revamp, right? It's a reset button. You're not
Hmm.
going to have these kids for 10, 12 years. You only got these kids for 2.5 to 4 years if you're lucky, right?
Yep.
So that was the attitude that I was trying to give to the tackle teams. It's like it's a short window of success. It's a short window. Put a program together that is successful,
Mm.
right? Because it's the same thing in tackle football, right? You have good player, then there's a relationship, then there's probably a pregnancy, and then all of a sudden the player doesn't come back as normal because now she's got too much of a workload. You got work and you got family, right? And it's gone. Now you got to look for the next person that you're going to have to blossom up, right?
Yeah.
So nobody understood that. They're like, what are you talking about? I said, because high school programs are built that way. A good coach in high school has to have that adjustment. A good coach in high school has to have an eye for talent. A good
Hmm.
coach in high school has to put something basic but effective, you know, to have the program stand out.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of the women's teams at the time, between the 2010 season and probably the early, 2020, I want to say 2014 or something like that, within that window, nobody understood that. Why did the IWFL fail? I think the IWFL failed because logistically they were not sound. They were not unified as owners. There was owners that were really doing a good job, and then there was the owners that just didn't care,
Yeah.
right? So the player talent pool was wasted on the other side. The talent pool that we know now, the names that we know now, the Adrian Smiths, as an example. There's a couple names that you go back in history, right, that are still here with us today, that experienced that 2000 to 2000 window where the IWFL was the league nationwide, and all of a sudden it failed.
Mm.
It just collapsed, right, underneath.
Yeah.
So either internal mismanagement or it just wasn't going to work, right? It just didn't work. And so all that time, Terry, you think about as a player, how much money you put in every year, 2010 to probably 14 years straight or something, right? Or 5, 7 years straight. You've invested all that money. And at the end of the day, you had nothing else to show for it, but maybe a team MVP, but no championship, no playoffs, no nationwide recognition, none of that. So
Yeah.
to me, that was just a disservice just to the player when the owners were not serious about it. So
Mm.
I got a little backlash from a lot of people. They didn't want to communicate with me, didn't want to message me because I was asking some of the hard questions, right? And then
Mm.
I ended up asking some of the hard questions about, where does the money go? Where's the money that goes for tryouts? Where does that go? Is it going to piggy bank? Does it go for the travel, the cost of the team? Where's the accountability and the finances that we got to look at, right? Where's everything going? Because everybody's like, oh, we fundraise for the travel and everything. It's fine. So what does the league do for you in terms of a travel aspect if you make the playoffs, as an example? If you make the playoffs, you're a good program. You should get a kickback, a bus
Agreed.
ride kickback to the playoff site or something, or do something beneficial that way, right?
Yep.
Crickets. I try to get the leadership of the WFA to answer those questions. Never was able to do that. To this day, I've never been able to sit down with any of the leadership of the WFA except for Win Domini, who at the time, Mile High Blaze was a representative of the league to answer some questions, and we were good friends and we had a good relationship. But other than that, no, none of that. And so to me, that was kind of like, those are questions that players were asking. Those are questions that even fans would ask. Where does the money go?
Yeah.
Attendance wise. So then I was told, you make no money in attendance because there's only 300 people and it's probably friends and families, and that's it. That is your audience, and that is your supportive audience. And to me, it was like, well, that's not a good thing because the local high school puts up like 16,000 fans in the same stands that you're playing in that local high school.
Yeah.
How is that different? Right?
Yeah.
It's just kids. It's young kids out there. So, so I was trying to correlate, Terry, the difference between why fans would want to go watch a high school game at a packed house versus a women's tackle game in the same facility, but only 300 people. It was kind of, it's a question to ask, right? Why? You're in the same community, right? You're a tackle team. You think the community would want to come out and support you too, but it wasn't the case, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no money. The money came from the high school. The money came from the private college, right? The money was filtered in by donors. So there's money there, right? So there's money to do whatever you need to do, fanfare, promote, whatever, to get the fans in the seats, right? 15, 20 uncles and aunts. They show up at the stands, right? Where on the other side, nobody cares. They didn't want to show up. It was either, your spouse, your partner. It was either a couple of people that showed up, friends that you dragged in to just watch it, right? And so the difference between quality of play is what I was getting at. The quality of play was basically the difference I was telling everybody. We don't have a good program for quality of play, and that's where women's tackle football has to go. It has to go to a quality of play, and then the coaching has to be serious, just like a high school program has to be serious about it. So, obviously it's different, right, Terry? Because in high school, the coach is getting paid by the public school system. So, and he's probably a teacher and he's a facilitator and other mess. So he's getting his paycheck. Where, on the tackle side, it's a volunteer position and he's putting in the extra hours, but he's really not going to get paid. So maybe he doesn't try as hard, right? And if you've coached women before, maybe that's not your cup of tea and you decide to bail on them, and then, and then the program collapses and things just start going that route. So the fan page grew in that sense, from the LFL focus to the tackle side once I started being aware of the WFA, the IWFL going forward, right? And so now I started building relationships with a lot of players, networking with people overseas, and I started to realize that it wasn't just the two U.S. leagues that were basically playing women's tackle football. It wasn't just the North American continent, right? I got notices. Hey, Canada is a league. Wow. Then I realized obviously it was in Saskatchewan, and I'm like, oh wow, 9 teams in Saskatchewan in the mid 2010s, right? And then obviously my family's from Mexico, and then a couple people from Middle Mexico saw my page and they started reaching out and like, hey, FX Mexico is here, and then you started giving me some of the leagues that were down south, Lexfa and everybody else, so that I got intrigued. I'm like, okay, let's look into it and see what's going on. Then from there, I got Australia. I got a program in Australia where somebody said, hey, we got the Queensland League starting to brew in Australia. That's how my relationship with Christy Moran and Lauren Evans got built. That's where my relationship with them created my No Joke Football brand apparel. So it was actually created by 2 Aussie players from Queensland.
Oh, interesting.
So that's
That's
And
the
so,
origin story.
Christy Moran, very talented, all world, obviously represented her country as well, multi-time champion in Queensland. Same thing with Lauren Evans, multi-time champion with the Stingrays uh, in terms of networking, where people were feeding me information now, feeding me stories, links, feeding me results, feeding me things about top players in each league, things like that. So I built that program that way, in that sense. So it was kind of nice to finally get to put a couple people in a meeting format. You know what I mean, where everybody was collaborating to bring the sport higher. Then I realized that obviously overseas there's issues. There was not a hotbed for 11s. Most of the formats were 7s or 9s. And I
Right.
started to realize that the game was different. Speed is different. The coaching's different. Everything's different. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't the true 11s like it was in the US. It wasn't a true 11s like it was out here to do that. And so that got me more intrigued too. Is like, how do you get to a level where 11s becomes competitive internationally as well? Because there's a lot of talent out there, globally, not beyond the U.S. borders. So that's how we shifted to the 11s in a nutshell.
Gotcha. It's very interesting. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the way you got into women's football was when you stumbled upon the LFL and you're intrigued by it. And so you kind of wanted to support that and cover it. And then when you started covering that, you had some relationships and people you ran into that introduced you to traditional women's football in the IWFL at the time. You're able to see a couple of games in that league. And then it got you curious about that league and how many teams there are and, all those fun details. Then that kind of branched off to Canada's league and then Mexico's league. And then obviously Australia. And now one thing that I think is the most impressive about you and your podcast, Oscar, is like how much you cover comprehensively, right? So like if I have my podcast, I'm talking about USA women's football and I cover the WFA and the WNFC. I mean, that's still 70, 80 teams. But it's not that hard because it's, I've been involved with both leagues and I've been to both championship weekends. And so it's not that difficult, right? It's not that much of a reach. A lot of teams, but still kind of doable. But what you do is like times 10, right? So not only are you covering these two main leagues in the US, but you're also covering leagues in different countries, leagues that are 7v7, 9v9. And so when you and Mark Simone go over, other leagues and scores and stuff, I'm just like trying to keep my head above water. You know what I'm saying? So I guess just because I'm new, but that's really impressive, man. So hats off to you for even attempting to do that. Cause I don't know how that feels, Oscar. It's one of the questions I had for you is, that's a lot of work. And so I have a lot of respect for you for even trying to cover that much, but I kind of feel like it would be one of those things where it could kind of feel like a burden because it's so time consuming. And it's a lot of stuff to cover. Right. So, it's time is money and it takes a lot of time to have all those ducks in a row for a weekly podcast to put out that information. So my first question for you is, since you are covering a lot and it's all different leagues and different, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11, what would you say, like, does that ever feel like a burden or you just love it so much that it doesn't even feel like work?
Overwhelming is the word.
Okay.
Depending on the season. Okay,
Okay.
that's the word.
Okay.
Initially, it was not a big deal because we were only covering like two international sites. We were covering at the time I was introduced to Sweden, Finland, and then I was only doing Australia.
Okay.
So literally just 3, and then the TUS North American swing.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't so bad. Then we got to the point where everybody started to branch out and go, hey, there's a league in the Netherlands. Hey, by the way, have you heard about Germany? And by the way, did you hear about the UK? And then there's a league in Austria and the Czech Republic. And by the way, did you even hear that there's a Gridiron West and there's, the ACT Gridiron? And so eventually it just got into the spider web. It started to, it started to create a web.
Yeah.
And so I had to shift my calendar, as Mark would say, Excel being your friend, then you got to shift your calendar. And then you're like, okay, now we have to break it down by quarters, because the US leagues are in April through August. And
Hmm.
then now we're going, okay, then everybody else in the NFL season is playing in terms of the fall season, which is usually in some parts of Europe play in the fall.
Hmm.
And then they play basically up to the January stage. And then it links into the US leagues in that sense. So literally it became year round without even knowing it.
Yeah.
So it literally became like it was year round. And so like for the fan page content, Terry,
Yeah.
a wonderful thing,
Mm.
right? Because it's like you weren't just focusing on two leagues and there's no more content and people drop off and say adios.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the fan page, that was a great thing because it's like, okay, the US leagues are over and now we can cover, the Czech Republic, we can cover the German season, we can cover the UK,
Yeah.
you can start covering all these other leagues. And now, okay, now you have content for 12 months
Yeah.
out of the year. So instantly you became sort of a ESPN, Fox Sports type of hub.
Yeah.
And so, it became fine. And so then we build relationships with some of those key people in those leagues
Mhm.
that were intrigued about our page. And then they're like, hey, can you cover our leagues? Can you cover, and I'm like, sure, let's do it. Just send me the links, send me photographers that are on site, anybody that wants to share that we can share. Let's do it. And so
Yeah.
that's how we have it now. Like right now, currently we're in that fall season where we're going to be in Australia, Czech Republic, Austria. Then we're going to be diving into Costa Rica. Then we're in Brazil and all these places. So now it's like kind of okay. So now we're at the end. And some of those leagues are obviously not true 11s. Some of those leagues are obviously 9-on-9s or 7-on-7s. And so, but it's still football, and it's and for our page, that's what people want, and so it's nice for us to cover a different aspect of football. So I treat it right now as we treat it as I should say we treat it as a substitute content for the main leagues, which are obviously the WNFC and the WFA currently as it stands right now. So they being the focus, kind of like the NFL, and then all of a sudden you got the XFL showing up, or the USFL showing up as an
Right.
alternate content. So
Yeah.
this is literally our alternate content versus the main content that we would normally display, which would be, in season in the US leagues. So it worked out pretty nice for us that way in the content.
Uh-huh.
Yes, the laboring is tough
Yeah.
because to get ready for the podcast, I have to get ready Sunday night and spend literally 4.5 hours gathering content and then
Mhm.
figure out where do we want to start and what's more important and how do we focus on a topic for 10 minutes at a time.
Mhm.
And then and as anywhere else, Terry, you've been on the podcast. We have a limited amount of window, so we either have to be very precise about comment and input because we only
Right.
have a short amount of window, and
Yeah.
then when you got an interview, the window is even shorter. So
Mhm.
you have to be. It's more like hot takes technically, and we've been on there. It's more hot takes. Say your piece, move on, be
Yeah. Yeah.
focused, be bold, move on,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's a time constraint. It's not like you can just kind of diddly daddle. But we love it because Mark, myself, we're very passionate about the sport, and hooking up with him, he's as passionate as I am to try to just bring exposure to it.
Mhm.
And it's nice that he's so knowledgeable and he's been through the ropes. It's because we're old, Terry. We're almost 50, and so we have vast knowledge of this whole thing that's happened over time.
Yeah.
Um, and like I told Russ Crawford when he was writing his book, which I have behind me, which is an awesome book. When I told Russ Crawford about everything that's happened, and he wrote the book, and it took him, I think, 5 years to write the book. And so, when you start putting that book together in a nutshell, and I've been only reading 2 chapters so far, and I can literally sit there and go, I lived through that. What he wrote, I lived through it. And
Yeah.
Mark's probably in the same boat. I lived through that. The IWFL window, the collapse of the IWFL. Where in the other books, like the Hail Mary books, right? There's probably people still alive that played tackle football in the '70s, and they're like, "Hey, I remember that." The
Yeah.
Leonard Jefferson era, right, in the '70s and stuff. So literally, we're at that stage where, we just want to bring exposure to the fact that there's these amazing women that do play tackle football. No different than, you would bring exposure to an NFL athlete. And firsthand, you're a coach. There are a handful of talented people that stand out on a roster. 4, 5, 6, 8,
Yeah.
right? And they are the best of the best. When you put them, as you said before on the radio, when you put them up against a nationwide, tryout, right? They literally would stand out
Yeah.
because they are that good.
Yeah.
And so, to come full circle, Odessa branching out from the IWFL
Mm-hmm.
and the WFA in a way,
Mm-hmm.
to me, it was a good business move, because at the time, the sport needed somebody to leap forward, not stay the same, not
Yeah.
run the wheel with the mouse.
I agree.
We don't need that, right? And so, and it was tough for her because, Terry, to change, people don't accept change very easily.
No, they
To
don't.
change, okay, you'll
Yeah.
get backlash. Are you crazy? Never going to work. Hasn't
Yeah.
worked in the past, right? All the
Naysayers.
naysayers.
Yep.
And so, I respect her, and to her point before, she mentioned it on our podcast, right? She already had put in so much money, in the past, and got her nowhere.
Mm.
Nowhere.
Mm.
And so to her, it was like, where do I get the profitability? And that's where I was standing to. It's like, where do we become profitable? It's like, and so to me, the WNFC coming into an existence and creation, and I don't want to hype one league over the other, but at the same time, I think if you're a player, if you're a coach in this industry that we are in women's tackle football, okay, we have been on that mouse wheel for too long, and we haven't got anywhere. And now we have the capacity of social media. We have the capacity to network instantly with, like me and you are doing right now, with meetings. Easy. We don't have to travel to see somebody and knock the door or anything. No, we have capacities to have meetings and be productive and really collaborate to get to the next level. I mean, the ultimate prize is going to be players physically getting paid,
Yeah.
getting sponsored, and getting paid by a team. Okay?
That's the goal.
I think Jen Walters said it best. Whether it's $1 or whether it's 10K, as long as you get paid, right, and consistently get paid. So if
Yeah.
you get the dollar paid consistently for a season, that's a first step. That means it's viable, right? But if you can substitute somebody's salary of what they're making now, which on average is probably what, 60K. Everybody in their job probably on average 60K. Some people are making 120 or something, in general. But I mean, on the low end scale to play football, if you can justify paying a roster 50K, everybody on the roster is going to make 45 to 50K. We've arrived. We have arrived. Even at 20K,
Absolutely.
we've arrived
Yeah.
on a part-time basis. The arena players get paid like $200 a game for an eight-week season, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're making like what, $3,000 for the season?
Yeah.
I think any female tackle player in the U.S., if they said, "Hey, you're going to get $5,000 for the season,"
They'd be
I think we're
stoked.
good.
Oh,
In terms of salary,
yeah.
and all that stuff. So I think we're at that next stage, and that's very important that we focus on elevating the awareness on a social media platform, because I will tell you, I get a lot of messages from a lot of people that said, I didn't even realize that they were in the city. They weren't local in the city. So,
Hear all
what I
the
mean?
time.
So it's like,
Yeah.
it's crazy, right? It's crazy to think that. But, it is clutter, right? Because you got the major high schools, you got the colleges, the pro teams. You got to penetrate that. And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't, right? And so, Mile High's hooked up with Denver, Boston hooked up with the Patriots, things like that. Waiting for Jerry Jones to hook up with the Texas Elite Spartans, and then we might break out.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I appreciate you sharing me the story. Because a lot of stuff I wasn't aware of. But from my perspective, I joined the women's tackle football world around 2014. I was the team I was coaching was independent at first. Then they joined the WFA, and at the time, WFA was head and shoulders above any other league that was offered. Right, there wasn't much competition. There's IWFL that wasn't a great option, and WFA was offering the best option as far as a league. And I was, happier than a pig in mud. So I was a big advocate for the WFA at the time, because at the time it was the best option and it wasn't close, right? And then, as you know, it's all about perspective. So when the WNFC was created, fortunately, when they had the Best of the West tournament in Vegas, where Texas Elite and San Diego Surge and Utah Falcons and maybe Seattle, I don't remember the fourth team, but they all went there and played a tournament. It ended up being Utah versus Texas, big surprise. And Texas won. Well, after they won, I went to I flew out there to watch, because I always try to watch, the best teams play. And after they had won, I congratulated OJ. She said, "Hey, we're going to be having a meeting in Plano, Texas, about a potential new league that we're starting, and I'd like you to be there." So I flew out to Plano, Texas, because I was intrigued. I was like, "What is this about?" And so I was at one of the first meetings where OJ explained, what this league was going to look like, what the business model was, and all the grassroots about the league. And when I left, Oscar, I was blown away. I couldn't have been more impressed. I was like, I don't know if they can pull this off, but if they can, because I love football and I love women's football. So like you said, the goal is for them to get paid, and the advancement of the sport is at my heart of hearts. So for them to have this, this brainstorming of a league that has all this like professional mindset and big picture stuff, it was so refreshing, right? So I didn't really know, and I'm not trying to diss the WFA, but like the WFA was the best option. So I kind of I had a hard time grasping something being better than that. And so it took them creating a new league for me to see it can be better. So now the question is, how much better can it be? Right. So I've seen big things happen. Like I've never seen a women's league stream all their games. WNFC's done that. I've never seen a league have a business model. They're not interested in having 60 teams, even though it makes it easier for geography. They know that, like it's going to water down, like to your point earlier, like it's going to water down the quality of the football that you're watching. And so the more blowouts there are, the more D3 teams there are that aren't competitive, it's going to kind of water down the product, and that's going to hurt you from getting big investors in there, you know what I mean? Which is what you need to get more exposure and people get eventually paid. So everything about OJ's vision, and let me clarify, WNFC is not a perfect league. I'm not, some, like sheep saying WNFC is flawless and they do everything correctly. And what I'm saying? Like, that's not the case. There's things they can do better, but I think it's very refreshing. The WNFC has this vision, and they were able to put it into motion, because a lot of people have a lot of good ideas, but those ideas never get off the ground. Right. And so now we're 4 years into it, and they already have national sponsors, big time sponsors. Them being able to stream all the games is phenomenal. And so I think they're the best option in women's football currently. I don't think it's really close, in my opinion. Maybe I'm biased because I'm in that league, but the whole thing's been really cool to see. And so it's interesting, like hearing about because before I joined women's football, I didn't know. Like, I've never watched Detroit Demolition play. I don't know about. I hear about stuff. Like, I hear about how good was it Dallas Diamonds? What was that team?
Dallas Diamonds, yeah.
Yeah.
Diamonds, Toledo Troopers.
Yeah.
The demolition in the early stages. Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, we have a rich history. That's the sad part. We have a rich history, and nobody knows it. Just like the NFL. If you go back to Canton, you start to realize the 30s in the NFL was nothing compared to now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And nothing. So we like I said before on the podcast, We are literally at that 1930s infancy in this sport right now. We're at the WNFC has brought us to the early 60s, mid 70s. That's where we're at right now. When the NFL got their CBS deal with, in the mid 60s and mid 70s, right?
Yeah.
And then they got their TV deals in the late 70s to early 80s. So we're still in that early stage of the 60s. The difference between the two leagues, okay?
Yeah.
I think you have to be very bold and frank about it. Okay. One is still truly a recreational league, even with TV exposure, even with the assistance of the FTF. Okay.
Yeah.
It's still a recreational league by all sense. Okay.
Hmm.
Where the WNFC, I still think that the reason she branched out, as to your point before, she's done startups before in her outside endeavors. She's
Hmm.
obviously done things that are business minded
Yeah.
to kickstart something.
Yeah.
She's worked within nonprofits. She's able to do networking. She's able to work understanding, how to fundraise. She's got, relationships in that aspect of it. Things. So to me, that's a benefit already, because you can sit there and you can be inspired by Jenkins just in a small conversation,
A lot of
right? You can
people
be
are.
inspired,
Yeah.
right? And so she has that in her belt, to where she has that natural motivational, what I call a natural motivational person that
Yeah.
gets you to that. If you're commission based, Terry, tomorrow, and she speaks to you for about 10 minutes, okay, you're going to go make a sale and you're going to get paid. That's literally how, she inspires you to do that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you're in that sense. And so that's a good thing, because that's a good leadership quality. It's an inspirational thing where it brings a person's best out. And so to me, it's like we have two leagues. Both leagues, I think, have to be understanding about where their status stands. Okay.
Mhm.
We have the NCAA and then we have the NFL,
Yeah.
right? The NCAA, not so much a feeder system now per se,
Yeah.
like in the old days, with all this other stuff that's going on with the changes. But
Mhm.
ultimately, that's what it was. It was a feeder system to the NFL. And so the WFA in itself has to realize that if it wants to keep its model that it currently has, it's fine. That's a fine model to have. You know, the point is, you're not going to get spotlighted, or you're not going to get elevated to that next NFL level unless, like you said, the markets are shrunken,
Mm.
because people do not want to support 60 teams. It's just not going to happen. You come to a sponsor, me and you, hey, can you go ahead and sponsor 60 teams? Not going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you come and says, can you sponsor this one team in this market? Then you're like, sure, because
Yeah.
it benefits me. It's one team in this market. I can do that, right? I can put in some hard-earned dollars to do that, right? It's
More
local to my
realistic.
market,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, exactly. So the reality is that, and
Mm.
that's what she's selling. That's what Riddell would jump on board. That's why Adidas would jump on board, right? Because she's not selling, non-NFL markets.
Mm.
She's actually selling NFL markets.
Yeah.
The Houstons, the Texas, the Dallas, right?
It's
Right?
transferable.
And you sprinkle in a couple of non-markets, which is what? Alabama, right? Birmingham, big
Mhm.
college town. So there's a couple markets that are still need to be worked on in terms of the WNFC, scope of things. But
Yeah.
overall, yes, in the 4 years, to get Vire to jump on to a brand new brand benefits them too, because they're brand new, they're a startup, right? It's a
Yeah.
win-win,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing. To have it streamed, every game,
That's
score 50 is score sports 58. If you're Bo, why do you not get hooked up? This is an upcoming brand,
phenomenal, man.
and you're going to be at the bottom of it, and you're going to be credited for elevating the brand. This is like the 60s, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the score sports 58 and Vire Sports literally were in the 60s when CBS took a gamble. And we live in a different world now because of streaming. So that is a benefit. Where in the
Yeah.
old days, no network would touch us.
That wasn't an
No
option.
network would even consider, streaming us, right?
Yeah.
Nobody would do that. And now it's a different ball game. So if you're able to, really, go to the table, explain to how is it going to benefit you, that there's
Mhm.
an open market for this brand, there's an open market for women's sports, and things like that. And we've seen it already, Terry, in the news, right? Women's soccer overseas, 32,000 crowd. over 44,000, right? And that's soccer, right?
Yeah.
And and the WNBA is growing. The WNBA is really making some inroads. It's 20 years later, but it's making inroads. So are we gonna hope that the WNFC is gonna do it in a quicker manner? Probably not, right? But 4 years turns into seven turns into 12, and then before you know it, year 18, we get the major contract, and it's a totally different ball game. So, competitive football is what she's preaching, because she knows if it's competitive football, that it will draw naturally. Okay. If it's not competitive football, it's a turnoff.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's a simple formula.
Mm.
And so she knows, and the pressure that is put on each franchise in the league, the pressure that is put on the coaching staff, the pressure that's put on some of the players themselves, right?
Step the game up.
This is not going to be the generation that elevates the brand. This is the foundation that sends the brand to that next level.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people realize that in terms of what's going on, right? And so it's refreshing to see where we're at, basically. Okay. It's also refreshing to see that the NFL has accepted us in Canton on the other side with the women's football alliance, and we have to give them credit too. They worked their butts off. Lisa, Jeff, Wynn, they worked their butts off. You don't get to be in Canton, right next to the backyard at Tom Benson Stadium, without having to bust your ass to get there.
Yeah.
And then a 5-year contract. Okay. So, both leagues, we have to applaud them. Both leagues we applaud.
Yeah.
Division I has gotten better, and all that. So I think, the takeaway is we are on that trajectory to get better. And we're at more visibility, right? The Gorilla has now noticed us. The NFL has noticed us. To put a display, a gallery in the Pro Football Hall of Fame from former WFA players like Jen King and Callie Branson and Dr. Jen Welter, and right.
Yeah.
That is way cool. It's the coolest thing ever, right? To go there and to see that. So does the WFA get fanfare for that? No, because some of those players don't put it out there. Don't put it out there that I started in the WFA. They don't vocally put it out there. The average NFL fan just knows that those coaches played in a women's tackle football league. But it's not that they go out of their way and say, we play in the Women's Football Alliance and it's 60 teams. No, it's there's nothing there. So, I don't know if there's a reason for it. It's a promotional thing, or the team doesn't do that, if it's a personal thing or whatever. But you got to give credit to Lisa, 2010 to now. It's the longest running tenured league worldwide.
Yeah.
It's the largest and everything. So, I mean, we can't take away anything that Jeff and Lisa have done. We can criticize all we want about, structure, recreational, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we still have to applaud them for their efforts up to this point, getting the FTF deal, being in Canton for 5 years, right? 3 division national championships, being on ESPN as well. So there's a lot of positives. That's my whole final takeaway from that, from both leagues.
Yeah, I would say the only thing I would add to what you just said is my only frustration with the WFA is I feel like when the WNFC was created and they had this motto, step your game up, right? And they put it into action. They got an Adidas sponsorship, they got a Rydell, they got Vire Network, et cetera, et cetera. That put pressure on the WFA to do more. Okay. And so what frustrates me is I believe in my heart of hearts, the WFA wouldn't have made those steps to do more if they didn't have to. And the only reason that they have is because the WNFC put that pressure on them to be like, listen, we're going to leave you in the dust if you don't do more. You know what I'm saying? And so that's just my opinion. And I'm, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. But that's just how I feel about it. You know what I mean? I wish the WFA had already.
Terry, you're a realtor.
Yeah.
You're a realtor. If you don't have competition in your market, right? If you don't have competition, are you elevating your game?
Yeah.
To get more clients and to be a better servicer, right?
Yeah.
Not going to happen, right? And that's literally what happened, right? The WFA was literally forced to elevate themselves when the other league did get the major sponsors. when the
Yeah.
other league did hook up with the major, you know what I mean?
Yeah, just
When the other
realistically.
league did get the TV streaming deal
Yeah.
to do all games, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, to your point, yeah, competition does try to get you to another level, and you
Yeah.
have to be competitive.
And the way to look at that positively is, for me, being a football fan and being a fan of women's football, I don't care how it gets done. I want it to get better. So I don't care if it takes the WNFC pushing the WFA to get better. I want all the players. I have no bias. Like, I want all the players to have the best experience they can. I want them all to have a chance to eventually get paid to play. I want them all to have sponsorships and get streamed.
Mhm.
So if I have my mom's in Northeast Ohio, she can watch me coach or play in Denver, or you know what I mean, wherever it's at. Like, that's super cool. And so I would hope
Yeah.
that the goal would be the same for everybody. But to your point, if another league has a more recreational mindset, maybe that's not what they're trying to do. And it's going to be harder to do, like you said, if you have 60 teams instead of 18 teams, because it's harder to pitch. The games aren't as competitive, et cetera, et cetera. Last question before we talk about NFL, before we get out of here. I appreciate your time, by the way.
Sure, let's do it.
Is the question is, for the league, the women's leagues in the US, what frustrates you, and what advice would you have for them to get to those next levels, in Oscar Lopez's opinion? What do you think? What do you think is missing? What could they do better? What could they do?
Frustration for me is the WFA is well with D1. D1 needs to be structured in a way where it's business minded.
Yeah.
Where I think D2 and D3 you can still use as a recreational setup. Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
in other words, you need to restructure the leagues, the three divisions, in a different mindset. That's what we need to do. If you really want D1 to elevate and be competitive to a WNFC, as an example, then the ownerships of the D1 owners have to be in a different setting, different mindset. Okay. You have good relationships with the NFL, right? You got Nevada that owns their own market. We got to help them own the market even more, because they only have collegiate competition, right? Things like
Yeah.
that. So to me, D1, if they want to stand out or be as competitive as the WNFC, as an example, the D1 owners have to make a better effort of, getting those teams support the Minnesotas of the world. 20 years, that matters. Does it matter to the Vikings? It hasn't mattered to the Vikings.
Not
Can
so
you
far.
get the Vikings to see that as a big deal, right? As a big program for 20 years, right?
Right.
It hasn't happened,
Right.
but Boston has. Kraft thinks that that the Boston Renegades are awesome, as an example, right? So that's the first step for me,
Yeah.
is trying to get D1 to realize that they got to go pro. They got to go into that pro mindset. They got to get to those teams into that pro mindset. Okay. For the WNFC, they stay the status. Go with what you got. Okay. Go with what you're doing. It's a 5-year plan. We're in year 4. What is 5 years going to look like, right? But the way that they're doing it, the way they're structuring it, Dillo will retire at some point. She will be full-fledged out there. You got good ownerships in Atlanta, the network with big network television partners. So there's a lot of people behind the scenes in the WNFC, to me, that are driving it as a business mentality, kind of like regular salesmen, right? You work for a company, you want that company to blossom, so you got to pick up another account. You got to pick up another account. You got to pick up another account.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference between the two. It's like, one is driven to acquire accounts to benefit you, while the other one is acquiring a support system, but it isn't at a level where it is self-sustaining, if that's the word, self-sustaining.
Yeah.
If you can get Riddell and Adidas to commit to 2 or 3 or 4.
It froze again. There we go. We're back. If you can get, you said if you can get Adidas or Riddell, are you muted? Go ahead and talk. There
what I
you
was
are.
saying is
You're back.
it's a good step on either side for both teams
Mhm.
because one is actually going into a business a game plan for 5 years. The
Mhm.
other one, yeah, you're on ESPN, you're in Canton, all that. Now you really need to, elevate your game with the D1 because the D1 teams are going to make you stand out.
Mhm.
Not that D2 is not going to do it or D3, right? But the D1 level of competition has to be so competitive that people it makes a difference. In other words, so
Yeah,
it
that's a
makes a
great
difference for the
point.
WFA to get the bigger sponsors. You know,
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. Even and like to your point, if the WFA were to do that, if they were to intentionally focus on WFA Pro and make sure that at least just that division is being handled at a pro level as far as exposure, as far as streaming, as far as competition, that would be a huge step up. Because right now it's not. Right now it's like a little bit of Wizard of Oz. We don't know how they select who gets in WFA Pro, and some teams are noticeably not as good as the other teams, which isn't good. So like I'm a big fan of transparency. WFC does a great job of that. So transparency would help a lot for us to know how you're selecting the
yeah,
teams to ensure that it is going to be very competitive because we want to see football at the
yeah,
highest level. So, WFA
yeah.
has enough teams that
It,
you can throw together 6 to 12 teams that are very good and
sure,
are going to play each other, tough. So,
the WFA has to do a better job, Terry, of promoting Boston, Minnesota, the big markets that are NFL sisters.
right.
They got to start doing that better.
Yeah.
They got to really do tailgating with the NFL teams. They got to go out there and do fanfare with those teams and make those NFL fans realize that they are in the backyard. Okay, because
Yeah.
I mean, if you can get a quarter of a Cleveland Browns attendance
Hmm.
to go to the Cleveland Fusion as an example, okay, then you win,
Huge. Huge.
slowly win,
Yeah.
right? If you can get a quarter of the New England Patriots fans to go over to Revere and watch Boston Renegades football, you win. Attendance wise, you win. Dollars are coming in, you win.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of controlling D1 to your point, like the WNFC is controlling 20. They're not
Mm.
going beyond 20 because beyond 20, as I said before, is unmanageable. You can't structure it. Why does the NFL only have 32? I mean, the NFL could go into any market they want at this point and own it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But logistically, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And why would you do that to each franchise? Because you already have a core base of fan base that will
Yeah.
support you.
For 32
There's
teams.
no need to go to. I mean, how long has it been since they wanted to go to Toronto? They won't go to Toronto. Why? Because Toronto is crap, and it
Yeah.
affects Buffalo. So why would you open Toronto as an external market when Buffalo is not sustainable once Toronto would open?
Right.
Right. So you have to WNFC, WFA have to think that way. Like
Mm.
Nevada is put in D1. Okay, how do we market Nevada to that north Nevada region and make people aware that women's tackle football is competitive?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's what you got to do. But can they? Can the Kings, can the D1 owners really streamline their collaboration and put money as a team where those markets need to be penetrated year to year to get more visibility and more attendance, into the stands at those high school, the high school levels. There's a lot of Terry. There's a lot of partnerships that still need to be made with local high schools
Yeah.
that I think is lacking in the WFA. If they did that better, I think the local high school fanfare would come to those games as well. Look what happened in Nevada, right? Nevada against Mile High and Nevada against Houston Energy. There was a packed house in Nevada,
Mm.
in that stadium. It was like a first time it was packed almost like a high school stadium. That's the electricity and the excitement that has to be built in each market in terms of the WFA, in terms of the D1 level.
Right. Gotcha. Understood. One question I had for you is how can people contact you? So when people watch this podcast, they might know you, not know you. They might know about Gridiron Beauties, they might not. But if they're a player or a league that you don't cover, right? What would be your advice about them contacting you to send you news, send you streams, um, like gets basically plugged in, right? Like so you cover a lot, but if there's leagues or players, that want to support your brand, whatever, how would you recommend that they get plugged in with you? hit your DMs?
The best way that I stay incognito most of my time.
Okay.
Unless you follow me on Facebook on my personal page, I stay incognito most of the time. So the best way to reach me would be through the Gridiron Beauties fan page. Just
Okay.
message me there. You can also message us on Instagram at Gridiron Beauties on Instagram.
You froze again. There, you're back.
I'm back. Yeah, I think I'm having difficulties because out there we had the rain this week and
Yeah, it's okay.
just a weak signal.
So you said the Gridiron Beauties Facebook page, they can DM you there, and there's an Instagram page too.
Yeah, the Gridiron Beauties on Instagram page. You guys can direct message us there. We do have a filter because of course we don't want perverts because they all assume we're female. Everybody is.
You froze again. Unmuted. Still muted. Oh, there we go. So you said people assume that you're females?
For some reason, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, you're back now.
I'm on the road, as I say. Yeah, no, what I'm saying is that's the best way to reach us. And so we do have a filter for that reason, because over time we've learned that obviously a lot of people assume that whoever is behind running the page is actually a female. A lot of people assume. So you get the occasional social media jerks that, they're a very
You froze again. Yeah, I know what you're saying though. With guys assuming that it's a woman, being unprofessional, sending stupid messages. Unfortunately, it's fair to assume. Are you unmuted? I only have one question left. I'm almost out of your hair.
All right. Well, I didn't catch the last part. What did you say?
Yeah, my last question was about NFL. So I wanted to hear what you think of the NFL so far. I know you're a Rams fan. So if you're willing to give me a quick synopsis of the NFL so far, how the Rams have gone in their first two games. What are your thoughts so far before I let you go?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead. NFL thoughts.
Okay. My Rams are not going to the Super Bowl.
Okay.
I can tell you that right now.
That's first.
Okay. After that Buffalo performance.
Yeah.
They will make the playoffs, Terry. I assume they will make the playoffs given Lance's injury and Garoppolo back at the helm in San Francisco and Geno Smith in Seattle and all that stuff. So I do have a hope that we'll make the playoffs, maybe a division title. Other than that, I think, but I doubt they're going to make the Super Bowl. I really do. I think our defense is way different without Von Miller. Unless they prove me wrong in the next 6 to 7 weeks, and they step up their game and really make their effort that way. Unless Robinson can blossom, right, with Cooper Kupp on the side like an OBJ. Other than that, my Rams, I think they'll make the playoffs. They'll be good to make the playoffs. Other than that,
fair enough. Well, I'm sorry about the technical issues with the video, but it was an awesome.
No, I think it was my end because I'm on the road and out here there's a lot of trees and stuff like that, and so bandwidth is always one of those tricky things, especially with Wi-Fi. So I apologize for that too to your audience.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure having me on. I want to tell everybody Terry's an awesome guy, very hardcore coach, does a lot of wonderful things in the women's tackle rule, and listen to his podcast weekly. He has a lot of good thoughts and great interviews. I'm happy to be part of one of those as well. And then I want to appreciate you, Terry, for taking some time out of your busy weekly schedule to be on the podcast when we are on the podcast, because your insights are very valuable. and it gives fans a different perspective, especially being a tackle football coach, a current tackle football coach.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate you too. You do an awesome job. The respect is mutual. And so whenever yours starts up again, assuming I'm not too busy, but I'll definitely join yours in the future. And it's been a great talk. I've been able to learn more about you. And so hopefully you enjoyed it. And so I'll talk to you
No,
soon.
I had a great time.
All right. You have a good night.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Safe travels. Okay.
All right. See ya.